Hey guys, so in this video we're going to take a look at the biology WAEC past questions and answer for 2024. So the idea is that we'll be reviewing 4 years backwards to 24, 23, 22 and 21. And afterwards we'll move over to areas of concentration, and finally we'll look at likely questions. Those are questions that you might see in your examination. So if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please do so you don't miss out on anything. Okay, so in this video we'll focus on the 2024 past question. So number one, which is A, it says state one function of each of the following parts of the nephron. Now the first part they gave us is glomerulus. So what is the major function of the glomerulus? It's very simple. Now students often talk about explain the term. You are not asked to explain the term, you're just asked to state the functions. Okay, so the major function of the glomerulus is ultrafiltration. Okay, so carries out ultrafiltration. That's the major function of the glomerulus. It carries out ultrafiltration. Okay, or you can say filters blood plasma. All right, so the second one, the Bowman's capsule. The function of the Bowman's capsule is to receive the filtrate, the glomerular filtrate. So the function of the Bowman's capsule is to receive the glomerular filtrates. All right, so that's the function of the Bowman's capsule. Now, the proximal convoluted tubule. Now, the major function of the proximal convoluted tubule, remember we have the proximal and distal. The proximal at the beginning and the distal at the end. Okay, so the function of the proximal convoluted tubule is to reabsorb. So we have selective reabsorption occurring in the proximal convoluted tubule. So here we can say reabsorption of important molecules like the AAs, the amino acids, glucose, etc. For the distal convoluted tubule, what's the function? Majorly, it regulates water balance. Okay, it regulates electrolyte and water balance. You can say pH balance. So majorly what it does is that it regulates electrolyte and water balance. It also regulates pH. Also regulates pH. So that is the answer for 1A. All right, 1B. Let's look at 1B. The question says complete the table below. So we are expected to fill in this table. Organism structure of excretion, forms in which waste are excreted. Okay. Now in this part, they are talking about nitrogenous waste. Okay. The first one is you can see under structure of excretion, contractile vacuole. So which organism use contractile vacuole as its structure of excretion? So we have mostly the protists. So amoeba is in this group. Then you can add the paramecium. The paramecium. Now, in what form are the waste excreted? Now, it is excreted in two forms: gaseous and liquid. Gaseous and liquid. All right. Now, flatworm. What is the structure of excretion? The structure of excretion in flatworm is the flame cell. The flame cell. The flame cell. And in what form? Liquid. The next one, earthworm. The structure of excretion in earthworm is nephridia. And in what form? Liquid as well. Now, in cockroach, cockroach is an insect. So in insects, it is the Malpighian tube, the Malpighian tubules. And in what form? Solid. Or you can say uric acid. Now, in humans, obviously, structure of excretion is the kidney, the skin. You can add the lungs. All right. Now, under structure, we have stomatal pore. So when you hear stomatal pore, what comes to your mind? It's a plant. So flowering plants use stomatal pores to excrete. And in what form? It's in gaseous form. So that is the answer for 1B. Now 1C, list 5 excretory products in plants. So you know the excretory products in plants. So number 1, oxygen. Number 2, carbon dioxide. Number 3, we have the latex. Number 4, renin. Number 5, you can add tannin. Okay, tannin. So that is the answer for 1C. All right, number 2. An individual ate a hot and large meal of cassava with salty groundnut soup. The individual was sweating profusely and did not drink water after the meal. So this is the question. A. State one role each played by the following organs. I. Mouth. I. Skin. I. Tongue. IV. Kidney. V. Small intestine. VI. Large intestine. And VII. Liver. All right, so let's start with the mouth. So what's the function of the mouth in that process? Firstly, the mouth contains the teeth and saliva that breaks down and moisten the food. So the mouth contains saliva and teeth that break down and moisten the food. Now the second one, the II, was the skin. Okay. So the function of the skin here is that it excretes excess salt and water. So the next one, III, is the tongue. The tongue. So the function of the tongue in that process is that it tastes the food and roll it into bolus. Okay. Now IV is the kidney. So the function of the kidney in this process is that it excretes, or you can say regulates, water and salt balance. Okay. Now the fifth part is the stomach. The stomach. What does the stomach do? It temporarily stores food. So it temporarily stores the food and further digest it. All right. So the next thing there is small intestine. So the small intestine. So what's the function of the small intestine in this case? It absorbs nutrients from the food. From the food into the bloodstream. Okay. Now, the next part we're looking at is the large intestine. Let's get rid of this. The large intestine. The large intestine receives the waste products and sends it to the rectum. Sends waste from food to the rectum for expulsion out of the body. Okay. Now, I think the last thing should be liver. The last thing should be liver. So, what's the function of the liver in this case? The liver converts excess glucose to glycogen and helps deaminate excess amino acid. Okay, so that's the answer for that question. So 2B, state three organs that would contain enzyme needed to break down the food. So the three organs that would contain enzyme, we have number one, the mouth. Two, we have the stomach. And three, we have the intestine. The intestine. All right. So 2C says state three digestive enzymes involved. So what are the digestive enzymes involved? So in the case of mouth, you can have the ptyalin. You can have the pancreatic amylase. And you can have, let's say, trypsin, the small intestine. Okay, so that's that. So 2D says state two end products of the meal. So majorly the meal contains carbohydrates and protein, which is from the cassava and the granules. So that should be, you would have glucose for the carbohydrate, and two, you would have amino acid. All right, so that's the answer for that question. So the E part of the question says state one effect of excess salt in the food, okay, or in that meal. So one of the effect of excess salt is high blood pressure. That's one of the effect of excess salt. Now, second one says state three advantages of the advantages the individual will have will derive from the food. So let's state that Number one, increase energy level. That's because of the carbs. Two, increased tissue repair because of the protein. Then we can have increased minerals and vitamins. So that's the answer for question 2. So number 3, a piece of raw meat was left in an uncovered bowl for 7 days, which used the information to answer question 3A and 3B. So the question states, state 4 likely change that would occur or that will be observed in the meat. All right, so let's do that. So number 1, you would have offensive smell, offensive smell, or you can say odor. You would have presence of maggot. You start seeing maggots in the meat. 3, microbial growth. You'll find some micro growing on the meat. Number 4, you can have change in color of the meat, change in color of the meat, and you can have change in texture. The meat must have decayed. So the meat must have decayed. So that's the answer for that question. So the next question says, name the biological process that led to the changes observed in the meat. It is very simple. Microbial growth. When once microbes start growing on the meat, you observe all those changes. So that's the answer for that question. All right, so let's look at 3AII. On the table, list 4 methods of preserving meat to prevent it from the changes stated in 3AI. That's the changes we stated before, and mention principles involved. Okay, so I think the first one there is salting. Number 1, salting. Now, what does salting do? It inhibits microbial growth. Remember, one of the major biological activity that led to the deterioration of the meat is microbial growth. So almost every preservation method works on that particular biological process. So salting inhibits microbial growth. That's growth of microorganisms. Microbial growth, probably by slowing down osmosis, or yes, osmosis. Then 2, let's do this. So number 2, we can have frying. So what frying does is that when you do deep frying, it reduces moisture in the meat, and inhibit microbial growth. Okay, so that's that. Then the next one, we have drying. What drying does is still reduce moisture, and inhibit bacterial growth. Still the same thing. Okay. Now we also have freezing. Freezing, number 4. So when you refrigerate the meat, what it does is that it reduces the rate of metabolism. It reduces the rate at which some reactions occur. Okay, remember, heat will increase of speeding up some reaction. So it reduces the rate of some reaction. of some reactions and also inhibit microbial growth. Okay, so that's the answer for that question. All right, so for the other questions in number 3, that's something you can just read up. So let's move to number 4. The question says complete the table below by stating the type of cell division and the type of set of chromosome for the listed cells. Now, in looking at this table, just looking at this table, you would observe that the catch here is that every cell that is a reproductive cell will always be meiosis. The one that's not a reproductive cell will always be mitosis. Now, when you come to the set of chromosome, a reproductive cell will always have a haploid number of chromosome. Meanwhile, a non-reproductive cell will always have a diploid number of chromosome. So with this information now, you can see onion cell undergoes mitotic division. So we would have diploid here. So it has a complete set of chromosome after mitosis. The next one is a sperm cell. Sperm cell is a reproductive cell. So we would have meiosis. And the set of chromosome here will be haploid because it contains just one set of chromosome. Pollen grain is also a reproductive cell. So meiosis then is also haploid, reproductive cell in plants. Ovum, meiosis and haploid. Then when we talk about guard cells, they undergo mitotic division. So mitosis and diploid. All right, so what would be here? Chick cell, obviously mitosis because it is diploid. So this is the answer for this particular question. All right, so question 4AII. What is mitosis? Now, a lot of people have a different definitions of mitosis, okay? But I would define mitosis as an addition division, where a parent cell divides to form genetically identical offspring. Okay, so different definitions of mitosis, but the idea is that the division gives rise to genetically identical offspring. Okay, and it mostly takes place in somatic cells. Somatic cell, that's body cells. All right, now 4B, explain briefly how parents with blood group A or B could have offspring with blood group O. Now, if you understand the genetics properly, you understand that this just has to do with recessive genes. All right. Now, the only way an offspring can come out as O when the parents are blood group A and B is that O is a recessive gene in the parent. That simply means that if this is the gene of the father and this is gene of the mother, it means that the father has this A gene and O gene. The mother has the B and O allele. Okay, so these are alleles. These are alleles. Now, this means that this man will appear as A, this woman will appear as B. This O will be suppressed. So this O is a recessive allele. This A is a dominant allele. So this will always dominate O. So since O is a recessive gene, if this is the case, if you cross them, you would have AB, right? AB, BO, and this is where the child will come from. Okay, So the child, it will only be possible to have an O child if the parents are carries the O recessive gene. If the O allele is present in their gene. So that's the explanation for that question.